not losing money will make you more money over time than taking a lower return. People told us in 2017 that getting laid off would be the best thing that ever happened to us. When you're looking at an object, does this represent my actual life or my fantasy life? Hey, welcome everybody. It's been a year since Troy and I have done a webinar updating on our retirement progress, and a lot has happened in the last year that we wanted to update you on. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. Just trying to give you a real look into what retirement looks like. So appreciate everybody for coming in today. We're just going to share in what we're doing in real life. I think there are a lot of kind of passive income myths and scams out there. And so it's really good that people who are actually going down this path or who want to go down this path are sharing what they're finding, what they're learning. And so that you can have better expectations of what's coming up and what's worth it, what's not worth it, trying to figure out what your goals are and hopefully identifying a little bit with our story where it applies to you and also being able to find the differences where it doesn't apply to you and being able to make some decisions based on that. So Troy, any thoughts on just sharing the story and helping people figure out which direction they want to go?
I think that that'll reveal itself as we move along here. So if we just jump into it.
Yeah, you just took the easy answer out. Just to catch you up, at the end of 2022, Troy and I were talking to Chris and Sasha about starting a fund. Well, we were wanting to eventually quit our job and eventually be able to retire early, but we weren't really sure what early retirement was going to look like and if we could even do it. I don't know if we really believe we could do it, but we were talking about starting a fund. And we finally decided we're going to quit our job and figure out how to make this work. And so Troy had picked a date to quit. It was like the end of January 2023. And we were having this meeting right before Thanksgiving, like a couple of days before Thanksgiving 2022. And a couple of days later, I think that meeting was like Saturday, Sunday. And on Wednesday, he calls me up and he said, I just got laid off. And we had a little celebration. Troy, can you unmute yourself and describe the difference between that layoff and the layoff that you had in 2017 that was a panic fest?
Yeah. So layoff in 2017, it was more of the throw all the stuff in the car, we're moving type of thing. It was wholly dependent upon finding another job and then as soon as possible, really, so that we could continue our lifestyle. And the difference between that and the recent layoff was that the recent layoff, we had put steps in place in order to supplement my income so that we weren't wholly dependent upon that income and that we had more options to lead it. So instead of the other one panicking and being like, I've got to replace what I've been doing with the exact same thing that I've been doing before, is I'm done doing what I was doing before. And I want to go find some new things to do. That's going to be a lot more fun and more in alignment with what I would like to be doing for the future here on out.
Yeah,
That's
it was
basically.
very different. I remember just thinking, yes, we get severance. Yes, he gets unemployment because when we were thinking about quitting, we weren't going to get any of those things. But when he lost his job in 2017, he had severance. He never collected any unemployment because we were just in like job finding mode. It was a panic. Finally found something. We found something actually quickly, so I feel lucky. But people told us in 2017 that getting laid off would be the best thing that ever happened to us. And given what the job that we got at the early 2018 that he kept almost exactly, it was almost 5 years to the day when he got laid off. It was just a couple days before Thanksgiving both times. And we packed up everything, moved across the country. I completely had to redesign my life. I was a photographer and I thought that's probably not the highest and best use of my time versus income potential. So I started a real estate investing business. And then it just got to the point where within a couple of months, I saw this can not only protect us from another layoff, but actually retire him early. So that's basically what happened in 2022. We had to figure out how to keep the bills on. I mean, keep the bills paid, to keeping the light. Like
Yeah,
you
we got to
go,
keep those bills no matter what we do. Please.
well, I yelled for was to get a debit card that would tap into my net worth and take that to the grocery store and eat because we were not accredited investors when we started, but we quickly had our net worth up over $2 million. And so I used to say I feel completely broke. We're technically multimillionaires, but it doesn't feel that way because not going to work for to get him a card that says, hey, take the equity out my money away. And so I felt like we had to figure out the cash flow and we for doing a lot of private debt and small rentals at that point. Well, a large apartment buildings that we were buying are more the long term play. You make your money on those on the exit. The general partner gets paid last because the investors and the bank get paid first. And so we were not getting seen, not a dime. Like we had money sunk into those $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 sunk into these projects, but we're not cash flowing. We weren't seeing any money. One of them was a new development project. One of them was a heavy value add. So we knew that it was almost like a new development. It's not going to cash flow for a while, things like that. And so we just really had to figure out what we were going to do. We wanted to retire. He wanted to quit his job. And so we, for the last year before he got laid off, we really started focusing more on cash flow and less on growth. Because when he was working with W-2, I didn't have to pull any money out of the business. I literally could just reinvest every dime of it and go after the high and almost to say the riskiest things possible because he had a job and we didn't need the money. But like I said, about a year or so before we were like, I think he can probably quit. We really shifted gears hard into cash flow versus just yield, not as much equity and more being private lending. All right. So this has happened to us recently about 2 years ago. When he was preparing to quit his job, I said, if we get rid of the house, which is that house at the top, we get rid of the house, then we can afford to have you quit your job a lot sooner because we're taking care of the big rocks first. The most expensive thing was this house. The original reason we bought the house is because it had a walkout basement. And we thought if we can remodel the basement, because we had remodeled our house in Texas, complete gut, we were very comfortable with construction management, doing things ourselves. And I thought, okay, if we could put a little apartment in the basement, then we could basically duplex this house. But we just never did. It was like 50-ish thousand dollars to do that. We just weren't really sure if we are going to get that back on the resale value. It just hemming and hawing in a couple of years. Well, I think we lived in this house like 4-ish, somewhere around 4.5 years. Hemming and hawing. We never put the apartment in the basement. So therefore the house was way too big for us. We had 6 kids and the house was still too big. It had 6 bedrooms and we had empty rooms, like extra family room, extra office. We had a room at the bottom of the stairs that was literally just for virtual reality. Like you had to walk down there and be like,
The VR
what
room. Yeah.
else? We did not need a virtual reality room, but it was a space where the kids could put on the headset and flail around and not have to worry about running into anything or tripping over anything. And I just thought, this is crazy. Like this asset is costing us, it's the most expensive thing that we own, the highest monthly. But because it was appreciating so fast in value, we kept justifying it, justifying it, justifying it. Finally, I said, look, if we just downsize, we can do this. So 2 years ago, we moved out of that house and rented it out.
So what did you do with the $50,000 that you were going to put towards the renovation, Emma?
An apartment in the smaller house. But here's the thing. The smaller house had an unfinished basement that was also a walkout. And so I knew just kind of doing the math, it was less square footage. I think it cost us like $45,000 to put the apartment in the basement of the smaller house. And it was a smaller house. It's still 5 bedrooms and how many bathrooms? Three and a
What's
half
5
bathrooms.
bedrooms with the finished basement?
It's well and smaller because it doesn't have all the extra living rooms, the extra office, all the extra public spaces. So it still has plenty enough
Right.
room for everybody, but there's no yard, and that is a huge time saver. So 2 years ago, we rented out the big house. We moved into the little house, and we knew that we wanted to travel full time once he quit, and that the little house would be easier to rent out, and that we could duplex it, meaning somebody could be in the basement, some people could be upstairs, and that's exactly what we did. We left on a trip, became full time travelers. And basically, our adult kids lived upstairs, rented out bedrooms, and then had a small family in the basement. And that worked out really well for us. And we just recently moved back into the house and sold the big house. What was it, like less than a month ago? And got a big chunk of cash that we didn't have to pay taxes on because we had lived in it 2 of the previous 5 years. So we had 3 years to move out of it to not have to pay any capital gains taxes because that's how residential homes, you get 500,000 or 250 per person. And so we didn't have to pay any capital gains taxes on the money we made on that house. And so down on the bottom, you can see on the lower right-hand corner, the little white house, we sold that house like a couple of weeks ago, just barely.
So
And
if I can make one point real quick here, something you glossed over a little bit is that instead of refinishing our basement, we decided to buy another asset, which
oh, yes.
in turn gave us additional tax depreciation, and it gave us another asset that could appreciate in equity. Whereas just finishing the basement would not have given us that, nor would we have gotten as much money out of the basement as buying another asset.
House and renting out the big house, they were both appreciating in value. And for the 6 months that the little house was being built, because it was new construction, we were living in our big house. Well, the little house was being built. And so for that first 6 months, it appreciated and borrowed $50,000 just in that first 6 months. So the appreciation there covered the basement. So that actually is a really good point because instead of getting marginal returns for that $50,000 in the big house basement, we were able to spend roughly the same. I think we only put $20,000 down on the little house and put right into the basement. And it's gone up in value actually faster than the big house because it's newer. So new construction, because there's it forces appreciation. The appreciation rate is much faster than an older asset, even if it's been kept in good condition like this house was. So that's actually a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So the cash that was sitting in the bank for the big house and the little house, we're basically just converting to hard money. And so if you look at the little tan house on the bottom, like these are the kinds of houses that we now leave because that's a fix and flip that somebody brought to Rise Capital and wanted a hard money loan so they can fix it. And so what we did is we just basically repossessioned the equity that we couldn't take to the grocery store, put it into a hard money loan. And that way we're getting regular payments every couple of months. We'll cash out a loan and then we're able to use that to survive for the next couple of months. So that's been a huge part of our strategy is slowing down on the equity and leaning into the hard money. And the fortunate part of that was that it happened at the same time the economy was slowing down. So our multifamily and commercial deals were, some of them were starting to underperform and they were stopped distribution. So at the time we were leaning into doing more hard money was at the very time that equity stopped paying us really anything. We weren't making much on them before, and then it got to the point where we weren't making anything. So I feel lucky that coincided because I felt bad going into debt because I'm like, it's only 10 or 12%. And over here we can make 18, 20%. But then when they started underperforming and the economy became more sluggish, they weren't really earning us that. Even when we sold them, they were selling for less than we had predicted and things like that. And so we actually ended up either breaking even on the debt in a much less risky way. And I think we probably even did a little bit better on the debt. I have to go back and do the math, but not losing money will make you more money over time than taking a lower return. So we learned that lesson. And a lot of our investors are in the same boat. They're like, my equity's not doing that great. How do I hedge those losses? Or how do I get into something that's less volatile and a little safer? And for us, the answer has been hard money. And that's why Rise Capital really focuses on that. We do a little bit of equity, but mostly hard money. So that's been a big change over the last year and a half. All right, Troy, do you want to talk about how people can figure out what their own goals are? Because your situation is different than our situation.
I guess the main thing you need to try and understand is what do you want? What's your goal as far as retirement, as far as what you want to accomplish in life? For me, I didn't really recognize that my goal was to help people. And the frustration with not being able to see how I'm helping people in an IT position in the background, maintaining systems and all that kind of thing. So that goal changed. As soon as I got laid off, I recognized that what the real problem was, and that my goal was to really just help people achieve financial freedom and educate them the best that I could and help them to not have to ever run into the same situation that we ran into. So in that process, though, that meant a change in lifestyle. So going from a six-figure income to a paycheck for 3 to 6 months, depending on how the investments come back, definitely changes my perspective on what subscription services I need, what's actually important. So what am I spending my money on? What are my goals with my money? It really helped me to basically drill in and focus on what that's going to look like. To us, we wanted to spend more time with our family, make experiences that our kids could remember forever. And that was what was important. It didn't matter how much time I spent in the office. My kids didn't really appreciate it because they never saw me when I home. They just thought of me as the absentee lecturer. I guess. You come home and just say, you're doing this wrong. You're doing this wrong. Now I'm going to bed. And that's not the relationship I wanted to have with my kids. I wanted to have the relationship before it. They were excited to see me. What adventure are we going on today, Dad? And looking forward to building experiences. After I'd gotten laid off, Emma had suggested, hey, let's do a family hike where we get to go see the world. And we get to spend all of our time with our kids and make these amazing experiences with them. In order to do that, though, we needed to understand what those expenses are going to look like. So we slashed as much of the expenses that we could out of our lives or our daily bills and everything that we were paying. And we had to decide, how are we going to pay for our adventure? If you rent your house out, And so you're not paying a mortgage, somebody else is paying that mortgage for you. And your other investments are also paying you enough money that you can it still provides money for food and for anything that we need on our adventure. It makes the decision much simpler because we'd reduced our expenses to nearly zero. And so all we really had to do was worry about food, shelter, and supplies in order to go on this hike for the 3 months that we did it. And that was
Yeah.
really exciting. That kind of helped all of us really realize that you don't need a lot in your life. You don't need a garage full of tools that you never use, right? You don't need this hobby closet that's just full of like buttons and things for your scrapbooking. This
Overplay.
often like games that you never play. Yes, exactly. But it helped reassess what my goals were with the hobbies that I did have. So, for example, I had a ton of games I had been collecting, and I had to reduce the amount of stuff that I had. And so those were part of that reduction. And so I had to look at the games and ask myself, what is my motivation to doing this? What is the underlying for what I'm trying to get out of this? And it ended up being that I enjoyed spending time with people. It wasn't necessarily the games. The new game that I'd play over somebody's house, and now I want that game, right? It was recognizing that the game wasn't what I needed. It was the experiences and that interaction with people that I was missing. And that in turn allowed me to just dump all of those games very easily and to instead focus on creating those interactions with people not only people that are dear to me, but just people in general, which I've really enjoyed this whole real estate experience because I've been able to make closer connections with people that I don't even know and learn about their stories and what their goals and they're trying to accomplish and being able to connect them with people that can help them achieve those goals. And so it's been really exciting for me. So it's reducing your expenses to the point where you can achieve that lifestyle that you're going for and understanding what that lifestyle is and asking yourself, what do I need it to do in order to achieve that? And once you've narrowed down what you want to do and what you want that lifestyle to look like, truly ask yourself why lifestyle is important to you. It makes reducing the amount of overhead that you currently have a lot easier in order to be able to achieve that.
You said I need to get to be fair, the equipment that we bought to go on this hike cost way more than the board games, okay? And they take way more totes up in the garage. But it was like we were actually hiking together every day and we were not playing board games together. We were not playing board games with our kids. You didn't have a group of friends like you did in Austin where you would take those board games over to their houses and spend time. It's just they just were not getting used, but at least we're using the hiking equipment. And that's the thing, even though it was far more expensive and takes up just as much space, it's something we're actually using. So you described it as letting go of your fantasy life. And you'll learn about this like when you watch minimalism or home organization videos or that kind of thing. Talking about like when you're looking at an object, does this represent my actual life or my fantasy life? I say I love the idea of playing all these board games, but I don't actually do it. It's the fantasy. And so your fantasy of the big house, like the fantasy was someday we're going to put a basement apartment in there, rent it out, or we'll move into our own basement and rent out the upstairs. And the yard, like someday we're going to redo the yard. And someday all the things we're going to do that we just were not doing and had to really come to terms with the fact, like how much money that was costing us because the board games themselves and the totes that they were in were not that expensive in the long run. It was like having to have a bigger house to fit all the stuff was very expensive. And so having to just think about what can we give up that is not going to be painful. Giving up the fantasy life can be emotionally painful, but once you give it up, it's really freeing because as we see on the next point down, like some people need to maintain a current lifestyle before they feel comfortable retiring. They're like, I don't want to buy a smaller house. I don't want to drive a crappy paid off car. I don't want to do that. So you just have to ask yourself, am I willing to keep working a few more years in order to make more money so that I have more to invest? So therefore I can retire at the same current level of lifestyle that I have right now. Ours was the answer to that was no. We're not willing to work extra years. Our kids are already starting to move out. Like it's now time and it was very important to us. So we slashed hard. But the key is thinking like slashing the fantasy stuff, slashing the idea of it, and really thinking to yourself, like, how bad do I want the future? And having that fantasy life become a reality. So this picture here. We're actually in the Grand Canyon. This was the day that we were hiking out. There's no trail. The Grand closed due to a snow it wasn't really an avalanche. What do you call it?
Is
When the boulders
is
are
is
melt.
like a rock slide, a landslide, where it had knocked out part of the trail and the utilities, like the water line, the power line
Mhm.
that was coming across the valley from the south side to the north side.
Yeah.
So
So the North Rim was basically closed. The village was closed. And the only way they let us down into the Grand Canyon was if we hiked out the side because we couldn't hike up
yeah.
the actual trail. They gave us a permit to hike out on this old section. And this is that day, probably one of the hardest days of our entire lives. The hardest thing that we've ever done is certainly as a family, but that day
Oh, come
represents
on, Emma. I guess up until then it was the hardest, right? Making cold calls, that's the hardest.
rather hike the Grand Canyon than make cold calls. But understanding like that we were actually doing this and we had cut out so much stuff so that we could then go live this. If this fantasy became a reality. And those are the kinds of thoughts you need to be asking yourself. What is really important? What do we really want? Because once you figure out what's really important, what you really want, it actually becomes much easier, like you said, to shed the fantasy stuff because you realize it's not as important as you thought. So getting real. So our retirement goals, we've talked about this before. When Troy, back when you used to work for the semiconductor manufacturing, he was like a contract repair tech. And so you would go in and repair stuff, and the rest of the time you were working at home. So you were doing your calls, scheduling returns, parts, ordering returns, all that from home. But I think the entire 12 years you worked there, I think you did a 40-hour week like twice. Usually it was somewhere
Y-
between 5 hours a week and 20 hours a week for 12 years. So he worked part-time doing that. And then I worked part-time doing photography, graphic design, things like that. And so we have lived a lifestyle for 12 years where dad was around and dad worked part-time, but you still got paid salary. So it was like getting paid to be on call. It was amazing. So we
Yeah.
already had a taste of that lifestyle. I knew that we liked it. And granted, there are some special considerations because it'd be like, you're home and I'm home and kid needs something. It's your turn. It's my turn. So that took us a while to settle into that role of who's going to do what and when's it going to happen and all that. Like, I'm working, you're working, and you know,
Yeah.
I don't think you're actually working. So it was just like an old retired couple where they're spending more time together and having to find their roles, except we had kids in the middle of it that we had to take care of. And so that was challenging, but we worked all that out years ago and we knew that we wanted that back. We knew we both want to be working part time. Didn't want to lose our purpose after retirement. And we wanted to be able to invest more because we had to slash a lot to be able to retire. And so we had to think, okay, look, how are we going to continue to earn money in our own business or something like that so that we have more money to invest so we can gradually increase our lifestyle over time, financial lifestyle. And so we just lived it super cheap for that first year. And then about 2 months ago, we stopped traveling and we moved back into our little house. So that with that we did not see coming, right? Like we had a couple of really scary months financially last spring, you think,
Yeah.
where we were waiting for loans to come back, waiting to sell stuff, sold a house to try and make ends meet. Like it was getting pretty scary there. And our kids were getting tired of traveling. They lived out of backpacks for 3 months. Then we lived in an RV for, I don't know, like 8 months. They were tired of it. So we moved back into our little house. And even that was challenging because our adult kids were living in it, shuffling everybody around. And so that we did not see coming. I feel like it was just one of those things where it was like, we're already paying for the house because as the roommates were moving out, we weren't getting that rent anymore. So we can already obviously afford it. So why don't we just go live in it ourselves? And our younger kids were like, yes, please. So that was because we were planning on going to Portugal for the summer, like 3, 4 months in Portugal, and none of the kids wanted to do it. So I just took my high school daughter. We went for 2 weeks as a preview trip and decided we didn't really want to move to Portugal, don't really like it that much, and ended up back in
Hmm.
Salt Lake in our little house. And so that was very unexpected. But at the same time, everybody just seems like they're really enjoying being settled. I don't know. I don't think
Yeah.
you like living in a smaller house, but you really like not working. So you're willing to make that trade off. I don't know. How are you feeling back?
Yeah, it makes things lots easier. I have to be more creative with the hobbies that I can have because of the limited space. But in fact, I'm thinking of putting a couple of ADUs in our back behind our house and don't
All right. Well, he's being sarcastic. Just don't tell anybody. I don't know whose house that is right behind our house. I thought we owned that land. Yeah, we do have a ADU in the basement here, like we said, and there's a small family renting that out from us. So even at 50 years old, we're still house hacking. Not everybody's willing to do that, but you just have to figure out like, what are you willing to do? I want to just repeat here. We went after the big rocks first, like our housing, our food, our transportation. I always laugh when people are like, how much money are you spending on Starbucks? I'm like, how much money is spent on your truck payment? Like, those are the questions you should be asking. Is my house, does my income deserve for me to live in this house? Do I have to keep working? And how long could I keep paying the payments on my house, my car, my kids' private school, all that stuff? If I lost my job tomorrow, how long could the ship keep sailing? And for us, it wasn't 3 months or 6 months emergency fund because you still had to go get a job after that. For us, it was like, if we quit, do we ever have to go back to work? And until the answer was never, like obviously in worst case scenario, we could always go start a simple business or get another job or something. But do we ever have to go back to work? And can we keep this golden goose laying eggs? Can we keep the flywheel going from one capital event to the next capital event so we don't have to work? And so asking yourself those questions were really important. But one thing I noticed is a lot of people are really focused on active income. Well, it's like a real estate agent who opens up their own brokerage and then business slows down and they're like immediately looking around. Okay, maybe I should open a restaurant. Maybe I should become a mortgage lender. And they're not thinking about the passive income that they should have been building that whole time. That active income isn't for lifestyle. That active income is for investments. And then the investments income decides your lifestyle. And so thinking
Yeah, you,
about it in that different way.
yeah, you definitely need money to be able to have your money work for you. So the more money you have that you accumulated, the more it can work for you later on in retirement when things start to slow down.
Yeah. But
It's security.
entrepreneurs spend it all thinking I can just go make more because they're skilled at making more money. They're skilled at starting another business. They're skilled at figuring it out. They spend it and then they start turning like 45, 50, and they're like, actually, maybe I can't keep going at this pace until I die. People say I never want to
Yeah.
retire. We do that a lot. And I get it because we don't want to lose our purpose and get bored. It is boring if you're not actively pursuing adventures. And sometimes if you don't have enough money to do what you want, then you're just sitting around being bored, right? It was really important that we didn't strap ourselves so hard that it wasn't even fun spending time with the kids because we could never go anywhere or afford to do anything. Asking yourself those questions like, I can't keep doing this until I'm 70. I can't even keep doing this until I'm 65. I love what I do. I never want to retire, but I don't want to do this for the next 25 years. And when people start to have that realization in their mid 40s to mid 50s, that's when they start thinking about passive income. The time to think about passive income is in your 30s when you finally start getting ahead and have a little bit of extra if you still live frugally. And then in your 50s, the world is open to you. So just think about yourself like you're not just diversifying between real estate and the stock market. You're diversifying between active streams of income and passive streams of income. And very few people think of active versus passive as a diversification tactic. It's naturally diversified because if I'm passive, I'm investing in somebody else's business. And if I'm active, I'm working in my own business. So therefore, that's diversified because it's two different businesses, right? But just the way that you spend your time is greatly enhanced if you can diversify between passive and active and start thinking about passive income streams. It takes a long time to get them ready. So you need to start thinking about them way before you need them. So that's the benefit. It provides you income, freedom, financial security, flexibility, because now we both work part-time. Some days he works more than I do. Sometimes I work more than he does. Most days he works more than I do, but that's a different webinar. That's a different slideshow. But it reduces the amount of financial stress. It doesn't eliminate it. Like I said, most of us who are living on our passive income and we invest a lot of our income. Think about the 4% rule of the stock market. We're living on like 1% rule. So actually 90% of the money we make has to be reinvested or the golden goose will no longer continue to lay eggs. And so some months are not actually stress-free financially. Sometimes we've had some of the greatest financial stresses of our lives during this last year. And I think that was a little unexpected. Like we really thought that it would be smooth sailing once we got everything out, but it's been really tough. So that's why we really had to think hard, cut the fat, and focus on the stuff that really mattered, not just with our lifestyle, but also with our investments. What is moving the needle the most? Let's do more of that and less of the stuff that is maybe building us net worth and building us wealth. We're retired. So, Troy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like how you put that positive spin on it, saying like the greatest financial trials. I like to think of it as not the biggest financial trials, but like the best financial trials that we've had. So you always have a positive mindset there.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. Because do you remember after our first baby was born and we could not get pregnant again? and went through about a year and a half going through that infertility and having that child and knowing exactly what we were missing out on by not having another child. Because sometimes when you don't have any kids and you're struggling to have them, it's just like this fantasy life. But we knew exactly what having a baby would be like. And so once we had our next child, it just became one of the things where even though it was difficult, he's crying all the time. And why did we want to do this again? Like it was very challenging, but we were so grateful for it because we had gone through that period of infertility and medical stuff. And it was like the best difficult time in our lives that we ever went through after we had that second baby. And there he is. Look, it's his 23rd birthday this weekend. So it's been quite a while since we went through that. But basically, what you're doing is you've got to figure out how to live below your means. Nobody's saying beans and rice. Maybe we chose to do that, but that might not be your cup of tea. But being very intentional about your lifestyle now so that you can think about what I want my lifestyle to be in the future, focusing on cash flow rather than the high returns, high yields. And when you have a lot of money invested, you don't need high returns, right? I think it's everybody's dream to have $10 million invested in boring stuff like T-bills that are returning or municipal bonds that are returning you like 5 or 6%, almost risk-free rate of return. But because you have so much money invested, you can really just play it very conservatively. And I think people lose sight of that. They think that as they get more money, they're going to be able to invest in more risky stuff. And maybe we'll do a venture capital fund where we'll lose 9 deals just to try and hit it big on the 10th one. I do see people, some go that way. Some go to much, much less risky. I have so much money, I can live on 5% and still have a great life. And other people are like, I have so much money, I can afford to lose $1 million and take this gamble. I know I'm more of the T-bill mentality, but every once in a while I'll see a deal. I'm like, oh, that one looks good. And I want to do something that's a little bit more risky because it's super interesting. So that's another diversification. It's like safety and risk have to be considered on the table at the same time. We have some equity for tax purposes, should hopefully potentially return more than the debt, but the debt is much safer, much less volatile, much more reliable. And so we're really trying to diversify between our risk profile. So you have to figure out where you are along that and then diversify along that a little bit. Some you're going to lean more to one side than the other, just personality basis. But once you get a lot of money invested, you just start having a lot more options about how risky you want to play it. It's fun money, fun, risky money versus just boring kind of private loans type of stuff. So that's how we're thinking.
Yeah, so I don't recommend taking out private loans from credit card companies. The
Well, we're the
biggest,
level.
no, that's what I'm saying. By using your credit cards and not paying them off monthly, you're actually taking out a private loan every time you do that. And their interest rates are way higher. And that's one of the things like adjusting your lifestyle is try to get rid of many of those as you can, or try to find out a way that you can pay them off every month, because 25% interest on whatever the balance is on your credit card, you're going to quickly eat through any of the income that you're getting off of your investments. So unless you can have an investment, like if you can figure out how to loan money to people at 25% plus, start your own credit card company or something.
Well, but it's so
yeah,
risky. The lender, like if MasterCard and Visa, we all big credit card companies make so much money, right? But they lose a lot of money and they give away a lot of perks and points.
they
And
do.
things. So they're making money off the backs of a certain sector, and then they're losing money on the people who just never pay it off, write it off, declare bankruptcy. So charging that kind of interest rate comes with an unsecured loan versus a private real estate debt that is secured against an asset. That's why they charge so much money and why it's so risky. And so the only way you can make something like that work is at huge volume. So credit card companies, that's why they
Right.
grow widespread. We're not going to be able to do that kind of volume where we can take that kind of a default rate, say mobile home loans, seller financing. You buy a mobile home and you sell it to somebody at rent to own, something like a 25% default rate. And you have to know that going into it and you have to be able to absorb that. So hard money loans have a much lower default rate, which I like because then I don't have to deal with it again. I don't have to be like, oh, I have to go flip this house myself now. So just be
Right.
thinking to yourself, if you have credit card debt, there's almost no investment that you can do that is going to return you more than that credit card debt. So that kind of stuff has got to go, or you're always going to be getting farther into the hole. I use credit cards in my business, right? But I have a plan and it's a short-term plan. And credit cards have really helped me build my business. So I'm not anti-credit card, but it's not for consumer stuff.
Yeah.
Unless it's
Well, like I said, it's nice to have around to where you're like, I need to come up with a bunch of money in a short amount of time. And I
Yeah.
can't wait a month or 2 months in order to be able to
Yeah.
my investment back. But if you can use your credit card to get that money quickly and then you quickly pay it off, then it's not that big of a deal. It's nice to have access to the credit, but it's even nicer if you don't have to use it.
We use it, but extenuating circumstances, very well thought out, planned ahead, like just be careful with that stuff. If
Exactly.
you have to focus on high yield if those are the kinds of expenses that you have. And some high yield usually doesn't cash flow very well. And so if you want something that cash flows, usually you're looking at things that are less risky and have less upside. So it's a
Right.
loan or a super stable apartment building that you're not going to do any construction. It's just vanilla kind of stuff. It's the less risk you have, the less return you're going to get.
Right.
And if you have large expenses and credit cards like that, then you can't really focus on those boring investments because you can't afford it. So get to the point where you can afford
Yeah.
it. All right. Beat that one into the ground. Let's see what comes next. All right. Troy, you want to answer some questions? How did we find our passive income streams? Can you tell us about some of our multiple streams of income?
Yeah. But I guess a photography business is not really that passive. So
Well, my
our passive
investment in
income.
the photography business, that would be passive, but
Right. That's right. Yeah. The way we found ours was investing in real estate. And I got to say that those are even questionable as actually passive or not, right? If you buy a fix and flip house and you fix it up and you flip it and you put a renter in there, it's still not passive. Like you might have some passive months, but fixing faucets, having water leaks, replacing air conditioners, like there's a little, some extra non-passive stuff that actually has to go on with that. So
yeah, I just
if
way
I
too
was,
long to water a fire and have to deal with insurance for months on end.
no, I guess, truly passive was after we had done that several times, we're investing as LPs into larger programs, like into larger multifamily and commercial real estate, and then investing into funds as an LP as well. So your returns aren't gonna be quite as high, but your money's going to be working for you and you're not going to really have to do a lot in that as your passive investment, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Jorge. Do you have a
So
thought?
I'll just move on to the next question. What are our best sources of income? Without a doubt, the private loans and the small rentals. Now, I love commercial real
Yeah.
estate. I'll have commercial real estate until the day I die. Like it has its own unique benefits. But the cash flow, the best cash flow we have for the small rentals and the private loans. So as we're selling off our small rentals because they're not that passive, and some months they're do nothing, and other months it's horrible. Yeah, selling these last 2 houses and getting the renters out, not passive, let's just put it that way. It was pretty awful, actually, going and cleaning up after spending 2 weeks at the property, doing manual labor, things like that. As we're selling those, we're able to then take them off of that and then reinvest that into stuff that's actually passive, which is for us private loans. Now, private loans are not taxed passively. Interest income is taxed as earned income. So you do have to have a plan on how you're going to handle your taxes with like depreciation and things like that. So we do have, like I said, enough equity that we can still write off our active income. We're real estate professionals, so we can write off our active income from our depreciation. So planning ahead with your tax professional is really important to make sure that you have enough depreciation and enough cash flow, both, because taxes actually are another stream of income if you plan for them correctly. So this little house that we live in right now, the $20,000 down payment that we put on it was from a tax refund. Because one year we had as many exemptions and withholdings as we possibly could, and we still ended up with a $25,000 tax refund. And we were like, well, it's a good thing we had a contract on that house, because when it came time to close it, we just took that refund and put it in there. So we got a free house from that standpoint, especially since we rented it out for the first 6 or 8 months before we moved into it. I really felt like we just got like a free house. That did not cost us a single dime. And now the rent is higher than the mortgage, and it's a brand new house, so there's no maintenance on it. It was a townhouse, so long term, there was not going to be any maintenance on it. So things like that, planning ahead and doing your taxes correctly, can create another stream of income. All right, learning to network and follow up. I have this on here in caps because I'm not actually great at the networking. I'm not great at the following up part. So calling people on the phone and being like, hey, we got an investment up. You ready to put some money in the fund? Oh, it's just painful for me. So I really struggle with that. So
Yeah.
following up,
Why is that so difficult?
it's cool.
Yeah, it's like you go to the conferences, you talk to people, it's amazing, like, to see, but like, how many people actually want to talk to you on the phone? It's like, We call people up on their phone and it's just so annoying. But I'd rather have somebody text me and say, hey, guess what? I'm about to give you a call. If
Yeah.
that's cool, give me a thumbs up. If not,
Yeah.
then just say stop and I'll leave you alone. It's just so much different when you're in person rather than trying to
Yeah.
bother somebody over the phone. That's how, it's
Well,
difficult.
this is why we do. You need to tell whatever kid that is making noise in the background that they're being super noisy. Getting organized about your follow up is really important. Even if you are not running the business, you are the limited partner because you're going to see deals like in your email inbox. And if you're unsubscribing from the newsletters and your email's a mess and all of that, then you're not going to see the deal. So setting up some sort of a folder filter. So when you sign up for the newsletter or the deal notifications that you're getting from people where you can have private passive investment. And when you're investing in public markets like the stock market, you just like log into your Robinhood or whatever, poke around, see what it is, and then there's no like central repository for these private deals. Most of the deals you're not even allowed to advertise. Like we advertise ours because we chose a fund structure where we could advertise. But a lot of the funds that you're going to want to be investing in, because we only want to be one place where you invest, right? We will put your money to work. You will get your mailbox money, so to speak. But to be truly diversified, like we offer diversification in our fund, but to be truly diversified, you need to be in other funds. You need to be in other people's funds. You need to be in private markets, in public markets, in all sorts of stuff. And so getting organized on your follow-up, calling people and say, hey, do you have a deal coming up? Did I miss it? Or putting all of their portals in a bookmark folder in your browser so you can go check on them, say once a month. Especially if you're having an event coming up, an investment's coming back, you're selling a rental house, something like that. You need to plan ahead because otherwise you just end up with like hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in your bank account, not doing anything because you have let your network go and you have fallen out of staying up to date on who's doing what, who's investing in what, and where those things are. It definitely takes some time on your part. When we say passive income, we don't mean that there's no work involved at all. The business is not your business. You do not work in the business, but you do have to manage your own portfolio. So stocks are 100% passive, right? You got to jump on your Robinhood or your M1 account and rebalance things every once in a while. You have to figure out the taxes. Like that part's going to be work. That part's never passive. But as long as you keep up on your portfolio management, your networking, be organized, check the emails, get back in touch with people that you want to invest with. It does take some work on your side. And if you're lazy about the follow-up or you're disorganized about the follow-up, then you're just going to miss out on deal after deal. And you have to keep your ear to the ground to get the best deals. Otherwise, you're just ending up with mediocre stuff that they're struggling to raise money and it's actually not that great. Setting aside that time to learn to read the financials, to follow up with people, you've got to learn, you've got to monitor, and then just dollar cost average. If you don't have a house to sell and have a couple $100,000 coming back from that, and you're just a high income earner and you get out of debt and just start setting money aside. That's one of the reasons in our fund where we have a $50,000 minimum for the fund. For each deal only has a $10,000 minimum because we had people calling us. They're like, I'm making like 10 grand a month in passive income and I'm still working. And then I have to let it sit in the bank for 5 months while I'm waiting to get another 50 grand that I can invest. So we just let people drip in at $10,000. If they can commit to the 50, they can just put it in pieces because our deals are smaller. It's hard money loans. And so we have one every month.
And they can put in a lot more than that if they want. Like you can put in all of 10 million if you want. That's fine as well. You're not limited to 50,000.
Well, we don't have that's for sure. We just want to be accommodating to people who have windfalls or what do you call it, investments that are coming back to them. And so they have a lot of money to deploy. And we want to have a lot of deals they can deploy over multiple deals. But we also want to reach the investor who's just dripping it in because they have done well on their passive income and have extra money every month that they want to be investing. So just thinking ahead, like, which of those do you fit into better? And making choices that fit your income, your lifestyle, and how that passive income is going to work for you. So diversify, stay organized, follow up. Don't think it's no work. It definitely takes work to stay organized and monitor the stuff. And no myths here, like no magical unicorns, passive income just going to show up and you never have to worry about money again. That's not how it works. You do need to be financially savvy. You need to learn how to read the financials and you need to keep up with the industry and what's going on. All right. Debt versus equity. This is what we've been talking about this whole time. Debt is when you are being paid out from an interest rate. So when you put your money in, they say, I'm going to pay you 10 to 12%. I'm going to pay you 10% if you put in less than $200,000. I'm going to pay you 12% if you put in more than $200,000 or whatever that fund. That's how our fund works. But however that fund works, you can expect to make that on your money unless the borrower defaults. So it's a very reliable way to know what your cash flow is going to be. They're basically short-term loans are when you're lending the money to fix something up. It's a fix and flip or a rehab loan. It's going to have some construction money in there. Or if it's long-term, we call that a mortgage. So whether it's commercial property, residential property, long-term is mortgage. We personally in our fund only do short-term loans. And anything we do long-term is going to be more on the equity side. Now, equity is where you are a partner who shares in not only profits, but also losses. That's why it's more risky. And if you look at where people get paid, the first position, the senior debt, that's what we do. First lien, first position, senior debt. And usually they're borrowing between 50 to 75% of the value of the property. And so we're having low maximums, low leverage, and we get paid first. Then who gets paid next? If people have a second lien position, that's also called mezzanine debt or a second mortgage, something like that. And if the borrower defaults and you sell the house like at auction or something, the senior debt gets paid first, and then the second or the third gets paid whatever's left over. And so this is a problem sometimes when people are private lending with unreputable operators. They'll put you in a third position lien, but you think it's first position. And so you're going to have to go back and check and make sure this operator doesn't do shady things like that they don't say they own properties that they don't actually have title to. Those are pretty common scams, private lending. So you got to keep your eye out for that and just know what to check. By telling you about
Mhm.
these scams, some people are going to be like, what? I can never invest in this. Like they just get confused or they get scared and they just are like, I'm out. But what I find is when I'm aware of this stuff, I actually feel more empowered because I'm like, now I know what to research. And you can never check every box. You can never be prepared for everything. This is where diversification comes in. It protects you from things underperforming. It protects you from incompetency. And it also protects you from just bad actors who are out there to scam you by telling you you're in first position when you're really in third. Or that, hey,
Right.
this loan's going against a property, and then you look it up in the title and actually own it. Well, count for those two things are big. We're thinking to yourself, like, who gets paid first? I want to get paid first because where I normally am is manager equity. So that's the GP down at the very bottom. So first I got to pay my bank. And then if we do have a second lien on it, which we don't do very often, but occasionally we might have a second lien for construction or something, then they get paid. Preferred equity, I don't personally work with that, but a lot of times when you're investing in somebody, just make sure if you're investing as common like limited partner equity, you need to know if there's preferred equity in that deal and somebody's getting paid before you. Or do they have a first and a second mortgage? Know where you are in getting paid. So just being aware of that. So coming back to the pros and cons of each, debt has more reliable income. Lenders get paid first because it makes sure you're in a first lien position. If you are in a second or third, much, much more risky. And you should be charging a lot more interest for those and just understand where you are in that stack. Double digit returns, again, hard money has 10 to 12% returns. The first time a friend of mine came to me and he said, hey, I want to flip a house, very experienced real estate investor, real estate family, like he knew what he was doing. When he comes to me, he said, I'd like to borrow some money. I was going to go do this flip and I'll pay you 10% and you can have it back in 6 months. I'm like, 10%? Like, I like this guy and I trust him, but that sounds risky, right? Like 10%, that's really high. The stock market's only paying 6 or 8. What makes me think that? And I totally trust this guy. He's the best friends. We have like Thanksgiving together. Our kids play together. And I just felt yummy. So understanding that 10 to 12% for private lending is normal. It's normal. It's not a scam. And you can actually even do better if you're in a second position lien. Again, it's riskier. So just understanding it will have double digit returns unless you're in a fund where they pay you even if your money's not out on a loan. So if you're in like a blind fund that's like a continuous offering or they're reinvesting, they'll probably give you a little bit less because sometimes it might be, sometimes it's not. And those types of funds tend to have slightly higher expenses that might eat into it because we got to keep money moving. So should be double digits, no less than I'd say 8%, 10. And if you put in enough money, you can usually negotiate up to 12. Cons are that they have lower returns in equity per deal, but I think on average, they usually do about the same because in equity, you're going to lose money like every 10 years. So you may be doing really well during the bubble years, and then you lose money on a couple deals, and suddenly you're like, I could have just done the same if I just stayed in debt that whole time. I stayed a private lender that whole time. Yes, it does have lower returns on a per deal basis, but at portfolio level, it does rival equity because of good times and bad times. And it doesn't have any tax benefits. That's a big con. Now, one way you can ameliorate that is the tax advantage if you go in with your self-directed IRA. And then you know that if you're invested in your IRA with equity, you can't use a depreciation. So if you look over the pros of equity, potentially higher returns, you can get depreciation for tax advantages. But if you're doing that inside your IRA, it's taxed differently. You're not getting that depreciation. And when you sell it, you might even get like a UBIT tax So you really do need to pay attention to if you're doing it inside or outside your IRA. There are certain strategies that work better for an IRA than others. So just be aware of what those are so that you can plan ahead accordingly. Equity, like I said, it partners, you get the profits and you get the losses. So definitely potentially higher returns, but it is a little bit riskier. I still like equity. We still do
Mhm.
equity. I'm trying to talk you out of equity. Just saying, be aware of what the strengths and weaknesses are so you can combine those to have a well-rounded portfolio that serves several different purposes. Cons, it depends upon the success of the business, and the returns are only projected. Whereas a loan, it's more reliable that you're actually going to make that. Because especially if you're in a loan where the default rate is pretty low, you're going to be pretty well assured that you're going to make what they say that you're going to make. All right. An example is if you're going to diversify, maybe you have $1 million to invest, right? And this is actually much more common than you would think. People call me up, they're like, I got $1 million between a house that I just sold, an inheritance that I had last year, and then I got a bunch sitting in an IRA. So let's just say you have $1 million, right? You want to be a general partner. Expect to buy your way into a general partnership at about $500,000. I mean, somebody else found the deal. Somebody else is going to manage the deal. You really are just coming in and you're partnering up by putting in a lot of money, maybe signing on the loan and maybe doing a little bit of this and that, helping out around tax time, something like that. But it's fairly passive, but it's high buy-in. So maybe you say, I'm going to set aside $500,000 and I'm going to put it into one deal. If you only have $1 million, probably not the best diversification plan, but that's how you're going to get into a GP unless you find the deal yourself and run your own real estate business. Then you're going to say, okay, now I have $100,000, 5 more buckets. I'm going to put some into limited partners real estate debt. I'm going to put some into other types of debt, like maybe you're going to do factoring on a business accounts receivable, or you're going to find out another way you can loan money to a business. Then you can say, okay, I want to also be a limited partner on some real estate equity for $100,000. Maybe you could do 2 deals, one at $50,000 each. And you could be a limited partner on other types of equity where you're doing maybe like a startup or you're going to invest in the boring business that your friend or your dad owns, plumbing, things like this. So when you're putting this down, you're like, I need to make roughly 10% on this $1 million to do 100 to let's say 120K a year. And if you're used to living on 300K, just multiply this by 3, right? $3 million to invest so that you can match your current level of income. So really think about it like in buckets, like how much money do I have and how do I want to split this up against all my different options? Everybody who has any kind of portfolio that can have enough money to not just have a little bit in the stock market in a 401k needs to have real estate debt in there. It is part of a healthy, balanced portfolio. Because a lot of our partners are like, oh, I only like equity. I make a lot more money. I'm like, that no financial manager will tell you that's okay. Like, you need to diversify. And so just be thinking, like, okay, I'm younger. I'm in my 30s or early 40s. I'm going to focus really hard on the equity because I need those higher returns. You're not going to be able to use any of that depreciation. It's going to carry forward for years and years, and you probably use it when you sell something, right? So the appreciation is not that useful. They just like the higher returns, but then they're not really thinking about the risk profile and how they're occasionally going to lose enough money that debt actually starts to look better. So just set some aside for debt and set some aside for equity. Just be thinking about that. It's just like a stocks and bonds kind of thing in your stock portfolio. Stocks would be equity, bonds would be loans. It's the same kind of thing. You're going to have to figure out how to allocate, how to balance that. Except private loans return a lot better than bonds do. I don't really like bonds that much, but I have a little bit just for safety. All right. If you would like to jump in and invest with us in our fund, partnerwithrice.com is our calendar. We get on a phone call, ask all the questions. We want to develop a relationship with you where you can call us. We'll pick up the phone and we'll answer your questions. That we communicate well, we communicate regularly. That's the most important thing, is that you're getting good communication about the deals. Our private lending, like I said, at 10% at 50,000 up to 199, at 12% if you put in over 200,000. And we're currently working on a continuous offering as well, where you can just keep your money moving and you don't have to really think about it. That will be somewhere in that 8 to 10% range. So just let us know. For honestly, like we get deals like this probably once a month or so. And then equity, we're doing every quarter, maybe every other quarter, just to keep that diversification there for the tax benefits. Also, if you want to hear more stories about passive income, we have, what are we up to, 100 episodes now, Tori? Something like that?
97,
Okay, he's the
maybe
editor.
100 after it.
After our slug pile gets published. So we're about up to 100
Yeah.
episodes now. You can go back and listen to Passive Income Adventures on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. And YouTube's fun because we also have little shorts and stuff that our family does, like our personal adventures. So go check that out, Passive Income Adventures on YouTube. And that will basically walk you through people who are doing rentals, people who are doing debt, people who are doing equity, people who are doing non-real estate stuff, other entrepreneurs, other investors. You'll be able to be inspired by the stories that they're telling so that you can think to yourself, gee, how can I incorporate some of this into my diversified portfolio? So lots of fun stories and conversations with interesting people doing interesting things. And again, the network is so important. Meeting the people on the show and just hearing about people doing what you want to be doing is so beneficial for your mindset to be like, I know this is going to be hard sometimes, but I'm going to keep after it. So would love if you come listen to the show and schedule a call with us.
Well, even in your podcast, for we give information for you to reach out to them directly. So if you listen to the podcast, you listen to episode, you really like what the guy is talking about, reach out to him, give them a call, and they're more than happy to sit down and talk with you as well. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's a great
I'm
way to
guessing
stay.
accessible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Sorry, I'm just trying to wrap it up here at the end. This image here I made recently because I was just trying to think more about like, how can I visually express my investing journey and the kinds of investors we want to work with? And again, the hiking kind of just came back to me because hiking is one of those things that while you're doing it can suck, but for whatever reason, you just keep doing it because you're a high achiever and you enjoy challenging yourself. But then there are those moments where you get to a vista, you sit down and you just look out over the ocean or the mountains or the sunset, whatever it is that's up there, or the waterfall, and think to yourself, wow, look what I just did. And now I can rest, relax, and enjoy the fruits of my labor. So, this is the kind of person that we personally strive to be and the kind of person that we really like to work with. So, you worked hard. It's time to enjoy the view. Again, you say you never want to retire, just totally fine. Keep challenging yourself. But every once in a while, it's really nice when you can slow down and just enjoy what you have created through your hard work. So, we want to be part of that journey with you. Here's how you get a hold of us. Again, partnerwithrice.com. You want to get a hold of me directly, investwithemma.com. Get on my calendar. And then Troy, okay, so I think it's partnerwithrice.com/Troy, right?
Yes. If you want to
Perfect.
get on my calendar.
Chris, if you want to talk to Sasha Smith directly. So just slash whatever the partner's name is, if you want to get on the phone with us and talk to us about things that you want to do in your life, passive income adventures that you want to have. And the reason we call it Rise Capital is this like rise, we want to help people rise up and just think bigger thoughts about what kind of life they want to have, volunteering, giving back, spending more time with human beings that love them, these kinds of things. Rise up and enjoy the view from how hard that you've gone to work. And we would love to be a part of that journey. So thank you for coming with us tonight. We have, let me see, we got a couple questions and would love to just get to know you better and help you out with your investing goals. Like people out there 5 years ago when we first started who were generous with their time and phone calls and attending conferences really have changed our lives. And it's helped us to develop like our own passion in life. It's going out and finding the people who were like we were like 6 years ago and changing their lives because now we have more time with our kids. We can volunteer more often. This is not just lip service. This is life-changing stuff. And we would be honored to be part of your journey in changing your own life.
And if we can't help you, we could point you into the right direction of who can. So it's all about connections. Feel free to reach out to us for anything, not only the products that we offer and the things that we can offer you, but for the connection with other people that can help you achieve your goals, or we can't help you. So happy to do that as well.
These are the real deals that we personally invest our money in to live an early retirement. So this is not just marketing. This is like the real
Right.
stuff that we're doing. And we're just really excited to share that with people when they ask us, like, what are you guys doing? How did you retire early? This is how. So we opened up a fund to share it with other people who want to go after the same kinds of goals. All right.
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Another webinar next month, risecapitalinvestments.co/webinar. You can get reminders for those if you jump on our email list, and we will remind you when to show up. And we will see you next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.